So how strong was Qui-Gon Jinn exactly? In the lore, he's described as being incredibly powerful, but let's take an objective look. Greetings again, acolytes and lore junkies, and welcome back to the archives. Qui-Gon Jinn has been hoisted up as one of the most influential Jedi in galactic history. He was the one who followed the will of the living force when no other Jedi would. This allowed him to locate the chosen one of prophecy, and to set him on a journey to becoming a Jedi. His willful defiance was what set in motion the events of the entire Star Wars saga, and his views on the Force were entirely unique. When every other Jedi had succumbed to dogma, Qui-Gon Jinn bent the laws of man in service of the laws of the Force, and in the end, he was able to retain his identity after death and become a Force ghost. The respect gained from his fierce independence has garnered him a reputation among our fellow acolytes as an extremely powerful and a capable Jedi. But over the years, his reputation of power has snowballed into something that is a bit overblown. So in today's video, we wanted to return to factual lore and answer one question: how powerful was Qui-Gon Jinn really? When he was alive, Qui-Gon Jinn was known for two things: being a maverick and having mastery over the Force on levels unseen by most Jedi. The last part is to be emphasized, as there was not a single Jedi who didn't acknowledge that there was something different about Qui-Gon. It wasn't that his raw potency was a spectacle. He wasn't moving entire buildings with telekinesis like Yoda, or warping reality to pass through walls like the Dark Woman could. While his raw power output was low, his connection to the light side was undeniable. It was pure. Qui-Gon took the stance that he was nothing more than a conduit of the living Force. The energy which flowed through all living and corporeal things was not only alive, but was sentient. Master Qui-Gon was of the belief that it was the duty of all Force sensitives to use that connection to the Force to serve its whims, even if that went against the Jedi. In Qui-Gon's eyes, being chosen to wield such power was not random. If one was given a gift, then they had to give something back. That something was unquestioning service. And so Qui-Gon Jinn dispatched himself into the galaxy as an agent of the Force's will. He went where the wind took him, and operated only based on what he felt in the moment. He was guided by the Force mentally and spiritually, never taking a step to the right or the left of what the Force desired. This often led him to doing rather odd things, and never questioning why. He helped any manner of creature that passed his way, believing that in doing so, he was helping the living Force. On one mission, he and Kenobi ventured to a jungle planet. He never told Obi-Wan why they were there. In fact, he didn't even know why they were there until he came face to face with the cave of Silan. Silans were giant creatures possibly created by the Sith. They were beings fully enmeshed in the dark side, and he and Obi-Wan would enter their lair and slay the horrid creature. Afterwards, Obi-Wan wondered why they had killed a sleeping beast even though it wasn't harming anything in the immediate. Qui-Gon answered that he did not entirely know why either. They could have prevented something horrible from happening though, or perhaps they were agents of retribution without even knowing it. All Qui-Gon knew was that the Force had willed the creature's death, so they were the ones to answer the call. He accepted that the will was far beyond his own understanding. He needed only act in accordance with the Force's urgings. This completely unique take on being a Jedi was why he quickly gained a mastery of the Force's powers as well. A mastery that was seen by all Jedi, even the High Council. The Council in fact saw him as a sufficient candidate for a permanent seat among them. However, because Qui-Gon Jinn was headstrong and stubborn, they did not accept him onto the Council. Jinn was free-flowing where other Jedi were rigid, firm where others were willing to compromise. The Council disliked him for that reason. But that reason was why he was also such a capable and an elevated warrior. As an agent of the Force's will, Qui-Gon wanted to be ready for anything. The complete Star Wars encyclopedia states that he was generally regarded as one of the best swordsmen of the Order, not only at the time, but that they had ever seen, which frankly is something that's thrown around a lot in the lore. However, Yoda corroborates this, considering Qui-Gon Jinn one of the best duelists that he has observed in nearly 4 centuries. Qui-Gon was trained to perfection in the traditional lightsaber combat by none other than his master Dooku. Both as a Jedi and as a Sith Lord, Dooku was a harsh teacher. He expected nothing less than perfection from his student. Even those that were considered great warriors, such as Windu, Dooku remained extremely critical of his own lightsaber form. For over a decade after Qui-Gon's death, Dooku would note Qui-Gon Jinn as a great duelist. Dooku would compare him with the rest of his apprentices, and believe that he remained the best fighter of all of them. In the book Lightsabers, A Guide to the Weapons of the Force, it lets us in on something interesting. It informs us that Qui-Gon Jinn mixed many unorthodox martial arts styles from across the galaxy and across his many missions and travels. This resulted in a style that was not as ornate as Dooku's, but incredibly practical and effective. He was a master at unarmed strikes and used maneuvers foreign to even Jedi. Another book, Jedi Power Battles, Prima's Official Guide, states that Qui-Gon was second only to Mace Windu in terms of deadliness with the lightsaber. He was so excellent in combat that he read his opponents as if reading their minds. He could tell exactly what the opponent was going to do just by looking at their footwork. He would analyze where they put their weight, such as the ball or the heel of their foot, and even the slight lean of their body. Using this information, he was 2 steps ahead, putting himself and his lightsaber exactly where they needed to be. Qui-Gon used this technique to utterly dismantle his fallen apprentice Xanatos during their own duel. The Dark Jedi tried to front like he was winning, but Qui-Gon saw straight through the bravado, sensing that Xanatos was growing desperate. But perhaps Qui-Gon's only issue was his stamina. He was a practitioner of one of the most physically demanding lightsaber forms, Ataru. It often relied on acrobatics, which fuel kinetic strikes and bursts of sudden aggression. It wasn't very sustainable in drawn-out fights either because of its energy cost. Not to mention, Qui-Gon's own stamina had atrophied in his older age. However, he wielded the form with such perfection that he made adjustments to his Ataru style that made him unique. In his older age, rather than use the acrobatics of the traditional form, he stayed on the ground while maintaining the energetic footwork and kinetic striking power. Interestingly, Ataru was typically used by those of much smaller stature, but Qui-Gon was very tall, being 6'3" or 1.93 meters in height. This put a strange spin on his Ataru style, where he put his muscles and height leverage in his movements rather than tumbling forward. This made Qui-Gon Jinn something rare, a heavyweight Ataru wielder, and very few people knew how to deal with that. Qui-Gon could last longer than most Ataru practitioners as well. Instead of using short bursts of energy, he could actually sustain himself in drawn-out duels using his new techniques. In fact, Qui-Gon regularly drilled himself to push the limits of his stamina, but eventually, he did have to pay the price, and once Qui-Gon was tired, his movements dropped off substantially. But that aside, Qui-Gon regularly measured as being one of the top 5 duelists of the era. A legendary blade master by the name of Anun Bandara would regard Qui-Gon as his superior, in fact. In the Jedi Academy training manual, it says this: renowned for his skill with the lightsaber, Jedi Master Anun Bandara is regarded by many of his peers and all of his apprentices as a role model, one whose combat prowess is unmatched in the Jedi Order. Bandara would disagree with this assessment though. During his tenure at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, he spars with superior lightsaber duelists such as Qui-Gon Jinn and Mace Windu all of the time, although he humbles himself when compared to their skill. Bandara's prowess is nonetheless considerable. Interestingly enough, the one who killed Anun Bandara was none other than Darth Maul. Despite being a Sith apprentice, we've proven before that Maul operated at the highest levels of the Jedi. In our first Gauntlet video, we determined that Maul would make it through most of them, stopping only at Ki-Adi-Mundi and Plo Koon. Maul had killed several highly adept Jedi in combat, and judged them all. And yet, even though Maul hated Jedi, he had nothing but praise for Qui-Gon. The very first time they clashed blades, Maul had gotten the drop on the Jedi Master, but Maul's private journal reveals his inner thoughts as Jinn rebuffs his ambush. The Jedi meets my first blow, blocking it. He has expected my flying maneuver. If an opponent can read you, the fight is over. I don't like that the Jedi was perfectly prepared for my first blow. Within seconds, I decide to throw away my usual combinations and strategies. The Jedi seems to know how I will move before I even do. Darth Maul had lost the element of surprise as soon as the fight began, and from that point on, Maul once again found himself as a student learning from a master. Maul notes how the sand does not seem to hamper Qui-Gon at all. Later in life, Obi-Wan would find out how difficult it was to fight on sand when he dueled Asherad Het. In that fight, Kenobi noted how one had to be an expert in desert combat to properly maintain balance on shifting sands. But Qui-Gon appears to have no issue with that at all. No matter where Maul struck, Qui-Gon was never off balance. Maul notices the power of his unique Ataru style as well. Despite his heavy movements, Qui-Gon is graceful, measured. The novel Endgame tells us this: after all the droids, assassins, gangsters, and soldiers he had vanquished, finally a worthy opponent. Not since he had fought and been defeated by his own master Darth Sidious had Maul been so committed to a challenge. So it seems in terms of blade skill, Qui-Gon Jinn was truly just as capable as many fans believe him to be. This suggests that a prime Qui-Gon would have perhaps been an equivalent duelist to maybe even Mace Windu, but as we all know, a Jedi's lightsaber skill is only half of the measurement. Let us now journey into the realm of the Force. Oddly enough, despite his pure connection to the light side, Qui-Gon is quite humble with his displays of power. We mentioned earlier, but Qui-Gon's strength doesn't lie in potency or grandiose displays like Anakin, Mace, or Yoda, nor does he showcase the esoteric such as Anya Kuro or Oppo Rancisis. Rather, he demonstrates a rare level of refinement and mastery of what is known. In terms of telekinesis, Qui-Gon doesn't have many feats that we would call exceptional. He was above average for a Jedi Master, capable of force-pushing groups of enemies with ease or collapsing tunnels when helped by other Jedi. Having said that, he operated on the same level as members of the High Council. This is displayed most prominently when he fought by their side in the Yinchori Uprising. But Qui-Gon Jinn's real talent begins to show itself in the realm of the mind. Jinn was an incredibly talented telepath. Obi-Wan noted that he could transmit full sentences to him. The reason this is significant is because Jedi telepathy doesn't usually work this way. Jedi are able to transmit feelings and impressions to one another. They are vague illuminations that guide the hand of their compatriots. Very rarely are Jedi able to actually speak verbal language through the mind. Only talented telepaths like Sei Tin and Plo Koon were capable of doing this. Qui-Gon in the lore has also been shown to conjure force illusions. Together with Adi Gallia and Plo Koon, the three infiltrated the minds of several pursuers and created an illusion from their ship. This threw off the attackers and completely fooled them. But what is likely his finest ability is the Jedi mind trick. Qui-Gon was able to trick Boss Nass into helping them without anyone noticing at all. He could also just cause people to pass out, which is what he did with the panicking Jar Jar when they were traveling through Naboo's core. But Qui-Gon's greatest feat in this realm was when he successfully and easily mind-tricked Jabba the Hutt. This was something that should have been basically impossible for any Jedi. Hutts have very powerful minds which are resistant to infiltration. Just like on the outside, it is said that they feel greasy in the Force. Jedi powers slide right off of them, but Qui-Gon used enough power and precision to penetrate that grease and fool a Hutt into doing his bidding. This was perhaps why it came as such a surprise to him that he could not mind trick Watto, who was so narrow-minded that he only cared for money. Having said all of that, we've saved his greatest ability for last, Force speed. Based on our estimation, Qui-Gon Jinn may be one of the fastest Jedi in all of the lore. He was regularly able to dodge multi-directional blaster fire without the need of a lightsaber, similar to feats like Grandmaster Yoda. His reaction time allowed him to react faster than a blaster could fire at point-blank range. On one occasion, Qui-Gon crossed a gap and took an enemy's head off without them ever reacting. On a separate occasion, without his lightsaber, he once disarmed and defeated an enemy before anyone else in the room could even take a breath. He was the one who trained Obi-Wan Kenobi to be adept at this skill as well, which Obi-Wan would carry deep into the Clone Wars. The two could move their lightsabers imperceptibly fast, weaving blurring motions of light that made them untouchable. It is in part due to this that I believe that helped Obi-Wan become the Master of Surisu. But even to a young Obi-Wan, he described his master's speed as beyond what the eye could follow. This goes to show that even though he doesn't use Ataru's acrobatics, that swiftness can manifest in other ways. And so, my friends, this is the true power with lore examples of how strong Qui-Gon Jinn really is. He's not a character that buckles the ground with every step he takes, but he is a highly capable Jedi who is clearly a cut above most wielders of the Force. Qui-Gon Jinn clearly belonged on the Jedi Council, but it's not likely that he could have lasted if pitted alone against someone like Dooku or Darth Sidious. But with that said, Qui-Gon Jinn is definitely not a Jedi one should mess with. But what do you think, my friend? Were your expectations met with Qui-Gon, or were they underwhelmed or exceeded? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, it's been an honor, and may the Force be with you.